We're live. Hey y'all, this is kind of an emergency video. I literally just did another video, the Steven Crowder video. But this one I saw on my feed, even though it's from a while ago, a couple months. I'm only just now seeing it, and I just feel the need to respond because well, there are a lot of thoughts, and this video here pertains to a lot of issues that are going to decide the 2020 election. Um, so I'm doing an unusual thing. I'm reacting to someone I like, and spoiler alert, I'm going to be in heavy disagreement here for most of it. But this is Secular Talk, Kyle Kulinski. I've been a fan of Kyle for so long. I mean, at least 7 years. I was in middle school when I started watching Kyle, at least freshman year of high school. He was one of the first people to articulate leftism in a way that did not harbor to identity politics, um, identity pandering, and really focused on the policy, really focused on the issues. Now, I'm not saying he was the only person out there doing that. I've come to learn that that's not the case, but this was a time when, like, the anti-SJW hold was taking over. And even other leftists, like Amazing Atheists, were focusing more time bashing SJWs than actually talking about leftist things. But Kyle was huge for me, and I owe a lot of my own kind of political awakening and my current political identity to Kyle. That being said, I've disagreed with him. Obviously, you shouldn't be in complete agreement to anybody. That means you haven't formed your own identity. But I've disagreed with him, especially in 2020 when it comes to Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. I was going to make a separate video on this, but I think this is as good of a time as any. So Kyle plans to vote third party. I do not know if he still plans to do this, because you see, this video was made in May. Things have gotten so much worse since May. Donald Trump has revealed himself to be even worse since May. After May, I think that's when, he started sending in the federal troops to Portland. That's when he started ordering, like, the tear gassing of peaceful protesters outside the White House for his little photo op. That is when he started putting protesters in unmarked vans. And of course, the body count from COVID has just continued to ramp up. Like, it just will not stop. And I can't remember where it was in May, but point is, things have changed. I do not know if Kyle still feels this way. So if he does, I don't believe he's made any official statement like, actually, I am voting for Joe Biden. If I'm wrong, cool. But still, it's important that we actually talk about this debate, because even before all of this stuff set in, I think Kyle's still wrong for voting third party, and we're going to talk about why.
So my friend Cenk Uygur and I went at it on Twitter. I understand that it's ridiculous that I just fought on Twitter after telling you guys only last week that fighting on Twitter is an incredible waste of time. I promise you, I absolutely hate from my core the idea of fighting on Twitter. I do think it's a total waste of time. And I actively go out of my way to avoid Twitter feuds. But one of the things he said, as you're about to see, I couldn't help but respond because I couldn't believe what I was reading. Now, again, Cenk Uyghur's a friend of mine, and we co-founded Justice Democrats together. There's a lot of agreement between us, but I guess you could say where there are disagreements, there are massive disagreements. Russiagate, for example, I was a strong opponent of it all along. He was a proponent of it all along.
By the way, did y'all hear about the Senate report that came out, just last week? Basically confirming Russiagate, or at least confirming many aspects that we believed about Russiagate. Nobody cares anymore. We've all moved on. We tried to impeach Trump on it. It didn't work. So now this report just came out and just kind of Nobody cared. But not that the Democrats should have made Russia their main strategy, but there was a lot of validity to Russiagate, or at least our fears of Russia interfering with our national elections to help elect Donald Trump. I think there is perfect reason to be concerned about that.
He since, modified his position somewhat to say, I'm not with the Rachel Maddow type people. I have my own kind of argument in favor of it. But, I would argue that when you look at the conclusion of the Mueller report and what's happened since, who was right on that? That's not what this segment is about, so I digress. But here's what he said on Twitter. And
by the way, I'm sorry, guys. I hope you cannot hear that lawnmower. I can. I'm praying it doesn't pick up on the mic. Just fair warning.
Here's my reaction to it. It's about Joe Biden. So he said, Joe Biden has 1,000 problems. I'll fight like hell to move him toward progressive positions. I'll almost certainly help to primary him in 2024. But not voting is still taking action. I agree. Not voting is taking action. It doesn't make you morally superior to those who make hard choices. It might do the opposite. Now, the thing that's stuck in my...
Bad strategy on Cenk's part. Bad. And look, I don't hate Cenk Uygur, but I don't think he's a great spokesman for our cause either. He really has a problem with this kind of condescending language. And it spills over into the Young Turks. I mean, the Young Turks programming is just, it's very off-putting to anyone who's not a hardcore leftist. And even if you are, it's still like you can recognize, like, these aren't the best arguments. Like, we want to make arguments that could appeal to middle America, independent America. But the Young Turks, I don't know. I just think it's unfortunate that Cenk Uygur is the one to start this whole debate with Kyle.
Crawl was that last part. He says, it doesn't make you morally superior to those who make hard choices. It might do the opposite. I'm not claiming, and nobody I know who's either not voting or voting third party is claiming that it makes us morally superior. I never said that. I never would say that. And also the idea that, well, you're not really making hard choices. How do you know? How do you know? How do you know how long it took me to come to this conclusion that I'm either not going to vote or vote third party? How do you know what I went through and what my calculations were and what my standards were and what my breakdown was? How do you know it wasn't a hard choice? In fact, I would argue it was a very hard choice. It took me a long time to think about it and run through it and really calculate it. So it is a hard choice. Whether somebody votes for Trump, votes for Biden, votes for nobody, votes for the Green Party, votes for the Peace and Freedom Party, votes for the Libertarian Party, just because they don't come to the same conclusion as you doesn't mean that it wasn't a hard choice and that a lot of thought didn't go into it. In fact, a lot of thought did go into it. And anybody who's familiar with this show knows, because I've explained in painstaking detail how and why I came to the conclusion I came to. So the idea, and this is what gets under my skin, he's making it sound like his decision to vote for Joe Biden is just like really brave or something. And, I'm not going to judge him for doing what he's doing because he has his reasons. But that's a lot. I'm giving him a much more charitable interpretation than he's willing to give us or me and people like me who are deciding to either not vote or vote third party. So he's got this grandiose view of what he's doing, that I'm making hard choices. And the idea is just like, well, obviously, since you don't agree with me, it wasn't a hard choice for you. That's just silly and very self-serving. And I just noticed that my shirt is not fully buttoned. But anyway, and then the line at the end there where he says, it might do the opposite. So I was taken aback by this, and I meant this, I tweeted this at him not to be snarky. It was a serious question on my part. I said, wait, so I might be morally inferior for not picking one of the two corrupt war criminals? Am I reading this right? And, again, I wasn't trying to be snarky. I was genuinely inquiring, because what Cenk is doing here is like a textbook example of what's called voter shaming. You don't agree with me. Here's my position. I'm, morally superior. You're morally inferior. That's the heavy implication of what he's saying there.
So, voter shaming is just a thing people, like, I'm sure Kyle would shame people for voting for Biden over Bernie, right? I mean, he would certainly not be as sympathetic or as charitable, I don't think, to that decision on voters' behalf. Like, I mean, you have the candidates you like, that you think are best, and if people are not voting for those candidates based on what you think is flawed reasoning, you shouldn't shame them, but we should have definitely a debate over the validity of that choice and whether or not the reasoning that led up to that choice what was logical or rational. Um, Cenk Uygur, not the best guy for that. Um, I definitely don't want to take a shameful tone. Um, that being said, obviously there are spokespeople for this cause or causes that you should criticize. Um, but it should never extend to the voters themselves. Like, never a basket of deplorables situation, for sure.
So I'm asking him, I'm like, hold on now. Are you like shaming and insulting everybody who doesn't agree with you on this? And his response is something else. His response is, yes, you are reading that right. George Bush and Adolf Hitler are both war criminals. Are you saying that not voting for either in an election between the two is the morally correct position? Because it most definitely isn't. Come on the show and let's have a real discussion on it. Now, I responded to that and said the following: why would I debate if I'm morally inferior? Can I call you a wife beater and then tell you to debate me on it? Not voting is an option. Stop pretending it isn't and shaming those who choose it. We aren't shaming you. While we're on hypotheticals, David Duke versus Richard Spencer. Go.
If you have a little bit of anxiety.
Bad hypothetical. Bad hypothetical. Yes, those are two equivalent people, right? Richard Spencer and David Duke, there are no significant differences in them or in what they would do if given power. Like, none that I can think of. Is Kyle saying that Joe Biden and Donald Trump are the same? Not that they're both problematic, right? That they're both the same. That is just something that is very easily proven wrong. You look at their current platforms, easily proven wrong. You look at what Joe Biden did as VP versus what Trump did in his first term, it's obviously wrong. They're not morally equivalent. Joe Biden helped to draft the peace deal with Iran. Trump ripped that up. Joe Biden helped to set up the peace accords, or at least he was a part of the administration that, the Paris Accords. He was a part of the administration that put us in the Paris Accords. Trump pulled us out. So, no, they are not the same. It's not a Richard Spencer or David Duke situation. I'm guessing that Kyle said that in objection to the Hitler thing, that like, oh, well, that's obviously an exaggeration. Yes, it's an exaggeration that reveals a truth, though. Donald Trump has not yet committed genocide, hasn't literally committed the Holocaust. He is a fascist, though. He is a fascist whose rise to power darkly parallels that of Adolf Hitler and other fascists throughout history. He's a demagogue who preys on xenophobic fears in the American people. He separates families at the border, puts children in cages. And I know technically Joe Biden was part of the administration that started that, but there was a big difference. The zero tolerance policy. The zero tolerance policy instituted by the Trump administration meant that in all circumstances, families caught at the border were to be separated. That is a new one. So even on immigration, which honestly is one of the most morally flawed aspects of the Obama years, it's still not equivalent, right? It's still not. Oh, turn the sound off, sorry.
I'm floored at the fact that he said this because his response was, yes, I'm calling you morally inferior for disagreeing with me on how to vote. That's what he said. That's not what I said. He started it by saying, yes, you are reading that right. So I am morally inferior for choosing to not vote or vote third party because I couldn't bring myself to vote for Donald Trump or Joe Biden. So even if Cenk's goal here is to create more Biden voters, why would you go around calling everybody who doesn't already agree with you morally inferior? You think the reaction people are going to have? Now, putting me aside, I have my own reasons for taking my position, but you think regular people are going to hear that? Cenk Uygur calls me morally inferior for not agreeing with him, and now I can't wait to go join his team. Obviously, it's counterproductive to your goal of creating more Biden voters, and I'm assuming that is his goal here, but I'm stunned. I'm floored at the fact that a guy like him doesn't realize that this is a basket of deplorables type comment. This is like...
So, a couple things here, right? First, I get it. I get why Kyle is upset about this. It was a comment that I think was meant to be upsetting. I don't think Cenk with that tweet was trying to create more Biden voters. I think he was expressing his honest frustration with third party Green Party voters. I think that was just an honest expression of his own feelings about that, not like campaigning on behalf of Joe Biden. I think he was just laying out what he saw as just a flawed way of thinking in approaching this election. So, is it counterproductive? I would not have gone the way he did, but it would be a mischaracterization to me to call that like him campaigning for Biden. I think he was just speaking out his own feelings, right? Um, yeah, let's just keep going.
Like a really smug, condescending, insulting, shaming, look down my nose at you type response. Now, listen, when we're having this conversation about who to vote for, we should have it in reality. So if you want to have the hypothetical conversation and you want to, test our theories by extrapolating to extreme scenarios and extreme analogies, I'm down for that conversation. But the fact that he immediately went to Hitler and George W. Bush. Now, in his analogy, who's Hitler? Trump. Which actually gets to, like, one of the main things that drives me crazy that a lot of Democratic voters don't understand, which is that Trump is not Hitler. He's not Hitler. He's not Hitler. Sorry. He's really...
Then pick Mussolini. Pick who's the guy from Spain? Francisco? Point is, pick any fascist out of the book. Pick anybody but Hitler, because obviously people are tired of Hitler comparisons. Point is, the comparison between Trump and fascist demagogues. It's accurate, it's valid, and by this point, I don't even know how a leftist would ignore it. Like, I understand this was made before Trump really went Super Saiyan with this shit, but I don't know what to tell you, man. Even just during the campaign, like, just the rhetoric, just the tricks he would pull, just the fears he would stoke. Obviously, he's a demagogue, and he clearly does not respect balance of powers, the rule of law. Every time a judge strikes down one of his obviously terribly unconstitutional executive orders, he cannot handle it. He cannot handle having to deal with any kind of balance of powers or accountability. That's why he likes dictators so much. Like, you remember what he said about the Tiananmen Square massacre? This was back in the 90s. He said it's a good thing the Chinese government shut that down because they could have had a real problem on their hands. That's Donald Trump. Now, whether you're saying, well, his record is not as fascist as his rhetoric, well, obviously right now I would disagree. Remember the Muslim ban? Are we just not even going to talk about the Muslim ban? Is there anybody out there keeping just a list of the things that Trump has done to this country? The Muslim ban. I can't remember how long it lasted, but that... How could you overlook that when we're talking about choices here between Trump and Biden? Like, Biden would never institute a Muslim ban.
Really bad. I'll grant you he's really bad. I'll grant you he has blood on his hands, and I can explain in detail how that's the case, whether it's the drone war, the continuation of the wars that are already going on, or what he's doing with Cuba, what he's doing with Iran, what he's trying to do with Venezuela. We can get into all that. But Donald Trump is not Hitler. So he's actually perfectly encapsulating something that I think is wrong with this mindset, which is a lot of Democratic voters tend to overstate how bad Trump is. That's not to say Trump isn't very, very bad. That's only to say he's not Adolf Hitler. They overestimate how bad Trump is, and they underestimate how bad Biden is. I've seen it so many times. And they just struggle to grasp the fact that there are many of us out there who don't think Trump is Hitler. We don't agree with you.
Well, if you don't think he's a demagogue, a fascist, autocrat in waiting, that he's not trying to consolidate power, suppress votes, I don't even know what to tell you. No, you don't think Trump is Hitler because Kyle is so anti-establishment that he is starting to overlap like with this troubling sentiment to me. That Kyle is so frustrated with the Democratic establishment, rightly so, that he like not sees that as a good reflection on Trump, but it seems to soften his own hatred for Trump. The fact that the Democratic establishment hates Trump and thinks that Trump is like equatable to a Nazi. Like Kyle seems to have his own opinion of Trump softened by that. You see what I mean? Like it's almost an enemy. The enemy of my enemy is my friend type of situation. Now Kyle will admit that Trump is bad, but he seems to think a lot of Democratic critiques of Trump are invalid. When I don't know what to tell you, I mean, there's perfectly reasonable reasons for thinking this, for saying this about Donald Trump, having these fears and concerns. But it's coming out of the Democratic establishment, and I really think that seems to taint the argument for Kyle. If you look at Donald Trump's record, there is no Democratic Party, Republican Party. Donald Trump comes along, you lay out his record, you would read it, and you would think, yeah, this guy is, he's a totalitarian. He's a fascist. I mean, he's an attempted totalitarian. We're trying to stop him from going full force. It's very difficult. Every day it gets more difficult. I mean, remember, in 2016, Donald Trump wouldn't even admit that he would concede the election. He wouldn't even accept the results. He said, we'll see. I'll let you know. Donald Trump implied that Hillary would try to steal the election and threatened to put her in jail. He threatened to jail his political opponents. By the way, he threatened to put Hillary in jail because Hillary did something that all of his people do. Everyone in his inner circle uses private servers when handling classified information. So
That is the embodiment of every single evil thing ever. He's not actively on purpose committing a genocide, and that's the point of what he's doing. That's not it. So if you want to have that hypothetical conversation, we can have the hypothetical conversation.
Wait, isn't he aiding the Saudis in Yemen? I mean, we're still doing arms deals with them, right? And they are committing a genocide. Now, Kyle's wording there was really interesting. He said he's not on purpose intentionally committing a genocide. Like, the bar is lowering for Trump so much that unless he comes out, tells his people, I want a genocide right now. Unless he does that, it seems like, I don't know, that the fascist comparison is still invalid. Unless he just comes right out and says, I want a genocide. Even if he's aiding in a genocide, right? Whether directly or indirectly through arms sales and continued support of the regime. I guess that's just not bad enough.
But I prefer to deal in reality, in empirical reality, and to talk about the election as such, to talk about the election as it is, because then you understand where I'm coming from and people like me are coming from a hell of a lot better. So while he entertained the hypothetical conversation, I gave him a hypothetical, David Duke versus Richard Spencer. Now, why did I go to that? Because that's presumably one where he would say, I don't want to vote for either one of them. Exactly. So I don't understand for the life of me where this idea comes from that they just try to erase the idea. Like, you're not allowed to sit out of the election, or that's not an option on the menu. But it is an option on the menu. Why does everybody pretend when they're trying to force you to vote for one of the two options that that's not an option? Of course it's an option. Literally 46% of the country took that option in 2016. Now we can.
Yeah, that's a problem. It's not that we're trying to say that it's literally not an option. It's that that option has consequences and it has an effect, right? And I don't see how you could vote third party unless you were, especially when we're talking about an incumbency election. We're trying to take out an incumbent. Unless you are content and comfortable with the status quo, and unless you truly think that the opposer would be as bad, like literally as bad, like, frankly, I think it's your civic duty to vote. I at least think that we should be making it easier to vote, encouraging people to vote. I would love to see that process streamlined. But when I say it's your civic duty, I mean, if you think, like, if you see a chance to make the world a better place, take it. Would the world not be a better place under Joe Biden? He would give us the public option, Kyle. I know it's not Medicare for all. I know, but it would help a lot of people. Donald Trump has no intention of covering more people, protecting more people from fraudulent insurance companies. He has no interest in that. Joe Biden at least wants the public option. We have a chance for that. If in the 1960s LBJ came out and said, I'm going to institute Medicare, would you have said, fuck you, I want it all. I want Medicare for all. And just like not giving a shit? Like you didn't see that as a great opportunity to help people? That because it was not the perfect ideal version of that idea, that it was not worth fighting for, and that it did not even lead to better options in the future. Without Medicare, we wouldn't have Medicare for all. We wouldn't have a precedent to sell to the American people. See, this is the thing, right? Like, when you vote third party in an election like this, you are taking out your frustration of the establishment on the American people. You're not hurting the establishment. Like, if Joe Biden loses, like, he's going to be bummed out, but he gets to go back to his mansions. He gets to go back to, being with his family, with his millions of dollars, still enjoying a high profile, a legacy, right? It's not like he's going to be written out of history. That's what happens if Joe Biden loses the election. You know what happens to people if Joe Biden loses the election, like regular people? They lose health care. They get arrested. They get separated from their families. They watch a president who continues to stoke fears and spread lies and conspiracy theories with his platform. Donald Trump still continues to spread conspiracy theories. And my God, he retweeted a video of people saying white power. So hopefully you won't see this as me shaming you, Kyle. But honestly, that's just what it is. And you're a smart guy, you know this, which is why I feel the need to criticize you, because you do know the weight that your action will have. And I think it's worth pointing out why I think that's flawed and why I think it is irresponsible. I mean, we have to take criticism. If you want to say, well, I'm a bootlicker who's allowing for the establishment, the establishment to continue, I would be happy to argue against that point. I would tell you exactly why I think it's more important to save lives, to literally save lives, rather than, take this moment to showcase my resentment of establishment politics. Why this is not the right time and place for that moment to happen. So, long rant, I know, but oh my God, this is really getting to the core of a very pressing issue right now. So, let's continue. Let's see if Kyle actually addresses the points I'm making right now.
You can try to understand why they have that position and where they're coming from, or you can wag your finger and say, God, you're morally inferior for doing what you did. Okay, well, good luck with your next election, and I hope your strategy of shaming people and insulting them comes to fruition for you and works out. And then the other thing is, I never understood I've gotten a bunch of requests to debate the idea of voting Biden, not voting Biden, or voting Biden versus voting third party, voting Biden or sitting out. I've gotten a bunch of requests to debate that. I don't understand why people think this is like a debatable thing. I have my own subjective beliefs about what's the most important. What are my top priorities? Biden either meets those standards or doesn't meet those standards to earn my vote. What's there to debate? Your reasons for voting, your criteria, your standards are going to be different than mine. Even if they're similar, they're going to be different. You're going to have different reasons and motivations for determining why to vote. So when people are like, let's debate on it, I'm like, what is there to debate? What are you going to do? You're going to try to logic chokehold me into, oh, you got me. Oh, now I have to vote for Joe Biden.
This is actually really concerning. That line of reasoning was I'm really surprised to hear Kyle make that argument. Why should you debate? Like, why should you validate your actions, your political actions? Why should you be able to um, argue for that on behalf of that decision? I mean, if you're just making a purely subjective vote, like you can't even defend it from you can't even defend it intellectually. What are we talking about then? Why are you in the political sphere if you can't like argue for and defend your decision here? Like, it's not above criticism. No decision is above criticism. If you can't match that, if you can't defend it from that criticism, um, is that not a sign to you that maybe it's not a very logical decision? Like, if I said, look, guys, me voting for Joe Biden is not up for debate, okay? You can say whatever you want. I'm not budging. I'm not. Would you look at me as like a rationalist and a person who really has thought that through, or would I come across like a very, I don't know, like an emotional person who has not thought critically about these issues, about this decision? So I'm a little troubled that Kyle would say that. I mean, I get that people, you have your decisions, and if you're saying, well, I mean, I get to make my own decisions, and I have the freedom to do that. Clearly, other people have the freedom to criticize you. Most certainly. Now, how you respond to that criticism, to me, it's very indicative of the way you made that choice. It reflects on that choice. So,
What is that? I mean, it's such a silly, it's such a ridiculous thing where the implication is, well, obviously I could try to like jujitsu you into changing your standards or something, and then voting based on my standards. And this gets to a major point that I've made over and over, which is, I've told you guys a million times, I'm not trying to convince anybody. I'm not out here proselytizing and evangelizing and saying, you must agree with me on not voting at all or voting for a Green Party or third party or whatever. I'm not doing that. I'm just telling you what my standards are, how Biden and Trump don't meet those standards, so I can't vote for one of them, and this is what I'm going to do. That's a lot different than proselytizing and evangelizing and me saying, I'm not voting for Biden and you shouldn't either. I'm not saying that. I don't care what you do. Which gets...
well, Kyle, you do have a platform, and you are adding to the public discourse, and participating in the discourse when you say who you plan to vote for, if you plan to vote. I mean, no, you're not telling me to vote third party, but you're definitely sending a message. But let's get back to the meeting a standard thing. I feel like people really see voting as like a reflection of themselves as a person. Like, who you vote for, the way you vote, is like a measure of who you are as a person, ideologically. An election is a binary choice. In this country, an election is a binary choice. Now, should it be? No. I would love to reform this system. It's stupid. But it has not been reformed. That has not happened. And by the way, we're never going to reform a system under a fascist. So that's not going to happen. We have a chance here to make the world a better place for people. That's really what it comes down to, in my opinion. I mean, if you're just waiting for first off, I don't understand how you have voted if, like, literally you have that list of criteria and you're not voting for anyone who doesn't meet it. I don't know if he has a checklist like, well, this candidate is for Medicare for all, but they're not for ending the drug war. Like, I don't know how you decide who meets your standard. Biden is certainly closer to your standard, right? Again, public option. We don't even talk about this. Biden is pushing for the public option. He did back in 2008. Obama and Biden did put the public option in Obamacare, but even with the supermajority of Democrats, they could not get enough votes. Like, it was still too much for Democrats, which means that the Democrats suck, but the Overton window has shifted a lot. People have a very different attitude towards the concept of socialized medicine now. And even if you don't think Biden can get it accomplished, I mean, he's going to try. What is Trump going to do with healthcare? He doesn't even have a platform. Like, there's nothing on his website that says what he plans to do about healthcare. He has no plan for that. Kyle says that's the most important issue for him. Okay, if you want to cover more people, vote for Joe Biden. Like, it's a binary choice. Yes, if you don't vote for Joe Biden and you're part of the Democratic base, you are aiding and supporting the other candidate. The other candidate being Donald Trump.
To the main point of what Cenk is doing here, and this another tweet that I didn't cue this up for you, but I'll just read it to you, because then he said, this wasn't tweeted at me, but this was like a subtweet. He says, for every leftist who thinks it's brilliant to sit out this election, I'm genuinely curious. What's your end game? Okay, Trump wins again, and then what happens? When do you pop out of the birthday cake and yell, surprise, as you take over the country? How will that work? Can't wait. Now, I love how he thinks this is like a gotcha, as if like, aha, I got you guys. But I never said there was a strategy. In fact, I've been crystal clear from day one. I'm doing this based on principle. Something that Cenk Uygur, of all people, should understand, because that's why he's off of MSNBC. He was offered a weekend time slot, and he said, no, I'm not going to do it. Why? Because he knew that they were trying to basically get him to tamp down his criticism of Obama and the Democrats. And so he said, as a matter of principle, I'm not going to do a show if I can't tell the truth and go after the Democrats.
See, though, this is where the smug reputation of third-party voters comes from. I do it out of principle. You vote just to put the better person in the White House. Stop neo-fascists from taking over the government. That's why you vote. I vote out of principle. I know that's not what Kyle is going for, but in this video defending third-party voters is just like, no, we're not smug. We don't think we're, better than people. Like, we just make the decisions we make. And then to do that and turn around and say, I mean, I vote out of principle. That's why I vote. I don't know why you vote. I guess your vote isn't very principled. Like, that's the implication. I don't see much of a principled stance here. To me, if a principled stance has no real-world impact, has no real-world benefit, is the world a better place? Because third-party voters, didn't suck it up and vote for Hillary in 2016. Is the world a better place because of that? Again, Kyle should agree with this. He's always talking about this. We're talking about just helping people. Like, that's all politics should be about. Is the world a better place because Hillary lost in 2016? Is the world a better place because people voted for Ralph Nader in 2000? Is the world a better place because of that? It ultimately granted us George W. Bush. That's all that decision did. It did not move the Democrats to the left. It didn't do anything. Can you point to one real-world benefit that this has taken? And if you're not voting to make the world a better place, why are you participating at all? If the debate is between just sticking to purely what you believe in versus helping people, I don't know what to say. We're having two different conversations. And I don't know why you're in the political sphere other than just to criticize people. Because when the opportunity comes around, this is not Kyle I'm talking about, because he's doing really good work with Justice Democrats. But for third-party voters whose only contributions to the political process is voting for someone who cannot win, I don't know. It's hard to see that as anything other than you making yourself feel good because you didn't settle for anybody. You voted for who you really believed in. By the way, Jill Stein was trash. Jill Stein was trash. She was an anti-vaxxer. She was insane. So even if I agreed with the premise that, well, we're just voting for the best people, right? We're just voting for the best people. Jill Stein was trash. Joe Jorgensen, the libertarian candidate running now, is trash. I honestly think she might even be worse than Donald Trump in terms of just sheer impact on our infrastructure and economy. So this video has gotten really long. I think I've covered the ground I meant to. And I hope I've made my case. Guys, if there are any third-party people who watch this, please, I'd be happy to debate it personally. I would really love to have that conversation because we we just have to deal with reality, right? I mean, if you're saying we don't, then I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. And at that point, yes, a conversation would be a waste of time. But if you think that voting third party is either efficient or morally superior, or morally better, if you think either of those two things, I would love to talk about that with you. So, also, no disrespect to Kyle Kulinski. Again, still a very big fan of his. I disagree with him heavily on this, and it's a shame that he's not open to debating this because I think I would not have to convince him that Joe Biden was a Marxist in order to get his vote. I don't. I think if you just laid it out for him, if you just asked him, look, I mean, you're voting not just between Trump and Joe Biden, you're voting between a public option and a privatized system. If I just said it that way, would he really still want to sit out? I don't know. But I would really love to have that conversation with him. My God, this is long. Okay, thanks y'all for watching.